Cleveland 911 police ambulance or fire.
Hey, check this out. I just came from McDonald's, right? This broad is trying to break out the fucking house next door to me. She like, this motherfucker done kidnapped me and my daughter, and we've been in this bitch. She think her name
Sir,
you know what I mean?
Sir, you have to calm down and slow down. Is she still in the street?
Yeah, I'm looking at her. She right now. She calling y'all. She on another phone.
Cleveland 911.
Hello, police.
You need police, fire, or ambulance.
I need police.
Okay, and what's going on there?
I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years, and I'm here. I'm free now. I'm across the street. I'm using the phone.
Okay, stay there with those neighbors. Talk to the police when they get there.
Okay.
Okay, talk to the police when they get there.
Okay. Hello?
Yeah, talk to the police when they get there.
Okay, all right. I'm going to wait now.
We're going to send them as soon as we get a car open.
No, I need them now before we get back.
Can you ask her if she needs an ambulance?
You need an ambulance? She needs everything. She's in a panic, bro. I guess she's been kidnapped, so, put yourself in her shoes.
The chilling 911 calls you just heard were made in 2013 after a woman made a daring escape after nearly a decade in captivity. The news shocked not only the Cleveland, Ohio neighborhood where the woman had been held, but the world as more unbelievable details about the House of Horrors were uncovered. The nightmare first began in 2002 when 21-year-old Michelle Knight left the home of a family member on August 23rd. Michelle had been on her way to a case management meeting about the custody of her 2-year-old son, Joey, when she got lost. While trying to figure out where exactly she was, Michelle was stopped on the street by a man who she quickly recognized as the father of one of her friends. Trusting this man was the worst mistake of her life. Growing up, Michelle had a difficult home life where her family struggled to get by. She spent much of her time helping to care for her siblings, but claimed to have been abused as a child and teen. At only 14, it all became too much for her, and she ran away from home, choosing to live on the streets instead. Eventually, Michelle decided to move back home and return to high school. Then at 18, Michelle became pregnant, allegedly as a result of an assault. Soon after, she gave birth to her son, Joey. Though she wanted to be the best mother possible for her son, Michelle eventually lost custody of him in 2002 after an incident reportedly involving her mother's boyfriend. Allegedly, the man became intoxicated and fractured Joey's knee. The young boy was then moved from the house and placed in foster care. She was on her way to a meeting, hoping to regain custody of Joey, when then 42-year-old Ariel Castro pulled over to offer her a lift to the hearing. Because Michelle knew him casually through one of his 4 children, she agreed. Castro worked as a school bus driver for the Cleveland Metropolitan School District and was a local musician. In the car, the two got to talking, and Castro offered Michelle a puppy. The young mom was thrilled, thinking a puppy would make for a great present for Joey. Castro told her they could pick up the puppy from his house before they continued to the meeting, but there was no puppy. Castro had likely been thinking about abducting someone for a long time. When he saw Michelle walking alone and she agreed to get in the car, he was presented with the perfect opportunity to carry out his fantasy. When they got to Castro's 2207 Seymour Avenue home and Michelle went inside, she had no idea that she would never be allowed to leave. Once in the home, Castro struck. He wrapped an extension cord around her neck, binding her arms and legs, and shoved a sock into her mouth to prevent her from screaming for help. Castro told her, "You're not going to leave for a long time," and began taking off his clothes. Terrified, Michelle started to beg him to let her go, telling him that she needed to get her son. Castro's response was to tear the photo of Joey she carried into tiny pieces. It was the only picture she had of him. He told her that she would never see her son again. He kept her chained in the dark basement for days and put a motorcycle helmet over her head to muffle her screams. This was just the first of repeated unimaginable horrors that Castro inflicted upon Michelle. He assaulted and beat her multiple times a day. To keep her cries from being heard, he played loud music to drown them out. At some point, Castro had allowed Michelle to have a pet dog, a pit bull puppy she named Lobo. But she claimed that when the dog bit him trying to protect her from him, he broke its neck in front of her. Castro felt a huge rush of power in those first few days with Michelle. He had complete control. He dictated when she could eat, what she wore, where she slept, what items she was allowed to have, and what happened to her own body. Killing the dog in front of her was another show of power and likely a scare tactic as well. He wanted her to be afraid and know that he was in charge. Castro lived alone, so there was no chance of anyone else stumbling upon Michelle hidden there, though. Though he had 4 children, none of them lived with him. His ex-common-law wife had custody of the children, and she moved out of Castro's home in 1996. It was her mother, Barbara Knight, who filed the missing person report about Michelle. The report describes what she was last seen wearing and states that she had a mental condition and that she confused her surroundings a lot, which may have been what happened just before Castro found her. Despite being kidnapped in broad daylight, the police believed that because Michelle had run away before, she might have done it again. They assumed that because she had lost custody of Joey, she decided to leave. This assumption may have greatly impacted any search efforts to find her. Michelle's case was eventually forgotten. Her name was taken off the missing persons database only 15 months after she was reported missing. Though she didn't know it, her mother still continued to search for her. However, some reports claim that her family made very little attempt to find her. When there was no sign of what had happened to Michelle, her son was eventually adopted by another family. On at least one occasion, Michelle tried to escape from the house of horrors where Castro kept her confined. During her attempt, her neck and back were hurt so badly she was afraid to try again. She said, "We had no way to get out of that house, and even if we tried, we got hurt." 7 months after Michelle had been kidnapped and held captive, 16-year-old Amanda Berry got up and got ready for work at a fast food restaurant on April 21st, 2003. She thought about calling in since the next day was her 17th birthday. Her entire life would have been different if she hadn't gone to work that day. It was during her walk home, only a few blocks from her house, that everything went horribly wrong. There was a vehicle sitting in a driveway at an angle where she had to go around. Amanda remembered smiling at the people inside the vehicle, a man and his daughter, because the daughter looked familiar to her. She believed it was one of her friends she had known in middle school, but then the vehicle started following after her as she walked. The man pulled up to her and asked if she wanted a ride home, and Amanda realized that the girl was no longer inside. When Amanda commented that the girl wasn't with the man anymore, he told her that his daughter was at his house and asked Amanda if she wanted to see her. Believing that the man was the father of her friend and therefore trustworthy, Amanda told him yes, a choice she would come to deeply regret. Amanda had gone to school with 2 of Castro's daughters, but what she didn't know was that neither lived with him, and in fact, they lived in a different neighborhood with their mother. Though it isn't entirely clear, it appears that Castro had been dropping off one of his daughters before he spotted Amanda and took advantage of the fact that she knew his daughter to lure her to his house. When they arrived at the house on Seymour Avenue, the man told her that the girl, his daughter, must have been in the bath. As they waited, he started to show her around the house, a house she could never be allowed to leave. Castro took Amanda upstairs and showed her where another young woman was fast asleep. Amanda didn't know it at the time, but the other woman was now 22-year-old Michelle Knight. The nightmare only got worse from there. Castro forced Amanda into the next bedroom where he told her to pull her pants down. After, Amanda's wrists and ankles were bound with tape. Castro went one step further and added a belt over the tape around her ankles. She was chained to a pole in the basement as Castro put a helmet over her head and told her that if she was quiet, he would take her home. It was a lie. The initial rush of power and excitement for Castro after he abducted Michelle had likely faded somewhat after 7 months. So he took Amanda to feel that huge rush again. Just like with Michelle, Amanda happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Castro saw the opportunity, and he acted on it. That first day, Amanda was left in the dark with only a TV for company. As much as she cried and screamed, no one came to save her. Her family reported that she was missing soon after, and she watched on TV in Castro's basement as her mother and sister made pleas for her safe return. After being in the house for 4 days, Castro brought Amanda back upstairs where he chained her to a radiator in a bedroom. Eventually, Castro asked her if there was anything she wanted to pass the time, and Amanda asked him for something she could write in. He brought her a diary with a tiny lock and key. In one of her first entries, she wrote, "You never know what you got till it's gone. I just can't wait to go home. I'm 17 now, but don't have a life. But he told me I'm young and will go home before summer. Another 2 months." It was another lie. A week after abducting Amanda, Castro called her family to taunt them about how he had taken her. He referred to her as Mandy, a nickname that only those close to her ever used, which especially disturbed her family. Castro also claimed that Amanda wanted to be with him. This call was almost Castro's downfall. He was literally 2 blocks away from being caught. Around this time, the FBI developed technology capable of tracking a cell phone's location, but it only worked if the phone was turned on. Authorities were able to narrow down the call to within 2 blocks of where Castro lived, and they staked out the area for weeks and waited for a sign of Amanda, but Castro never turned the phone back on, so they eventually gave up. There were thousands of reported sightings of Amanda over the years. There were even times when people reported that she had died, but her family kept hope because her body was never found. Over the years that she was held captive, Amanda addressed almost all of her diary entries to her mother, Luana Miller, who died at 43 in 2006 from heart failure. Though her family said she died of a broken heart after losing Amanda, who she searched for relentlessly, she never learned what became of her daughter. It isn't known for sure how Amanda found out her mother had died, but the women sometimes had access to a TV or VCR where they frequently saw updates in their own missing persons cases, so she may have seen the death announced on the news. After, she still addressed her diary entries to her but wrote, "Mother in heaven." When Amanda was first taken, Michelle only saw her for a few minutes, but then didn't see her again for months. Castro likely kept the girls separate so they wouldn't be able to band together against him. If they were together when he wasn't around, he wouldn't know what they were discussing, especially what they were saying about him, and this would make him feel like he was not in control. Everything Castro did was about control. Even with 2 women already held hostage in his house, Castro wanted more. A year after he took Amanda, he went looking for another victim. Castro promised Amanda that if he got another girl into the house, then he would finally take her home. It was another lie. Again, Castro was searching for the high of that initial abduction because it had worn off after a year. As time passed, Castro began to anticipate the next abduction. The more he thought about doing it, the more he wanted to. He likely felt a huge thrill and rush of power each time he took a new girl. It seems that, with each kidnapping, Castro felt more confident and more dangerous as he captured younger women each time. Just 5 blocks from where Amanda had been taken, Castro ran into someone he knew on April 2, 2004. Castro's daughter, Ariel Castro, was walking home from school with 14-year-old Gina DeJesus. The girls were going to hang out, but when Arlene's mother said no, Gina started on the long walk to her house alone. She called her own mother and told her she was on her way, but she would never make it. Arlene was the last person to see Gina before she went missing. Castro also knew Gina's father, so when his vehicle pulled up next to her on the sidewalk, she wasn't too alarmed to see him. Castro asked Gina if she had seen Arlene, and when she said she had, he asked for her help locating her. The request didn't seem out of the ordinary for the teen, so she agreed and got into the car with him. But Castro didn't take her to find Arlene. Instead, he brought her to his house where he asked her to help him move some equipment. By now, Gina was understandably alarmed. Then Castro's behavior changed. Instead of telling her what equipment he needed help with, he started to groom himself in front of her, trimming his eyebrows, mustache, and nose hairs. He shifted his attention to her and began inappropriately touching her. Gina warned him he could go to jail because she was so young, and he responded that she could leave. However, he had one stipulation. She had to leave out a different door than the one she came in and use the basement door. Likely just feeling relieved that she could leave, Gina didn't ask any questions. Once in the basement, Castro pounced and tried to chain her up. At first, the chains weren't tight enough, and Gina managed to get loose. She tried to run, but Castro caught her and overpowered her, though she managed to land a few hard kicks on him. Gina screamed for help, but he had turned up the volume of the radio in his basement and the radio in the living room so no one could hear her. He managed to tie her up and left her in his basement. The day she went missing, Gina's mother, Nancy Ruiz, called police to report that she had disappeared. Yet investigators didn't immediately look into Gina's disappearance as a missing child because they assumed she may have run away from home. When the search for Gina finally began, something especially twisted happened. Castro joined in the efforts, all the while knowing exactly where Gina was. Because Castro was friends with Gina's father, he helped pass out flyers about her disappearance and even comforted Gina's mother while at a vigil for her a year after she'd gone missing. Castro likely joined the search to gain access to information about the case and any possible leads. He may have also wanted to ensure that he was not a suspect since Gina was last seen with his daughter. And finally, he likely felt excitement that he was helping with the search and that no one but him knew the truth. For the first few weeks that Castro held Gina captive, he mostly left her alone, but on May 7, 2004, he assaulted her for the first time. Horrifically, he continued to do so regularly. He chained up Michelle and Gina together in the same room where they had to share a mattress. They would remain together in that room during their entire captivity. On a few occasions, Michelle tried to intervene when Castro attempted to assault Gina, which resulted in her being assaulted and beaten more often herself. He would assault each of them while the other was still in the room. Castro had kidnapped all 3 women within 20 months in a roughly 5-block area. Inside the home, the women were forced to live in filthy and cramped conditions. They were chained up, tortured, and starved. All suffered from depression, sickness, and bed bugs. During the first winter she was there, Michelle was left naked for months with just a thin sheet to keep warm. She also wasn't allowed to shower for the first 8 months after she was taken. Amanda was kept in a room the size of a closet with a dirty and old mattress. She had to go to the bathroom in a bucket, which was kept in the room with her and smelled terrible. Anytime Castro showed them any kindness, it always came with disturbing conditions. Amanda recalled that whenever he allowed her to shower, she had to shower with him. Castro frequently assaulted the women. In order to muffle any sounds of their cries for help, he used the sound system to play loud music so no one would hear. Amanda said she tried to numb herself, but she secretly kept track of each instance of assault with a number at the top of the pages in her diary, with the hope that one day he would be caught and punished. Michelle became pregnant on 4 or 5 occasions, but Castro forced her to miscarry each pregnancy by beating her so severely. The injuries were so damaging that they left Michelle unable to have any more children. He ensured none could escape by boarding up the windows and locking all of the doors. Castro also psychologically manipulated them. Testing them to see if they would try to escape, he sometimes pretended to leave the house and then would sneak back in without the women knowing. That way, they could never really trust he was gone. He would check that they hadn't tried to leave and warn that if he ever caught them attempting to escape, he would kill them. Other forms of Castro's manipulations were calculated gifts and deprivation to pin the girls against each other. Castro used a domestic economy to hand out rewards to the women. He would give them cash allowances that they could use to buy food and other necessities, which he could also take away. In order to ensure the women didn't trust each other, he intentionally played mind games with them, often between Amanda and Michelle. When he first took Gina, he gave her the nicest room and let her eat first, which caused some resentment between the women. Buying occasional little gifts for the girls was a manipulation tactic to gain their trust and cooperation. When you have had literally everything taken away from you, such as Michelle, Amanda, and Gina did, a small item takes on a larger meaning. Making sure the girls didn't trust each other was Castro's way of ensuring they didn't join forces against him. It was another form of control. One of the cruelest moments of many cruelties was when Castro told Gina she had to play Russian roulette with him and take turns pointing the gun at each other. He claimed to have loaded the gun with 1 bullet. At that point, Gina felt like she had nothing to lose because she thought she was going to be in that house forever. But in a resistance streak, Gina also wanted a chance to pull the trigger while the gun was aimed at Castro. She wanted to kill him. She pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. Michelle was the most outwardly resistant to Castro. She often talked back to him, refusing to use his name when she spoke to him. Instead, she called him dude. Castro disliked her the most out of his captives because she refused to break. Michelle later said, "He wanted to break me, and that's something he couldn't do, because you can't break someone who's already broken. You can only make them stronger." Something that all the women held onto was hope. Whether it was finding strength in the belief that their families would never give up on them, or even resistance by fantasizing that they could kill Castro with rat poison. At first, the three women were kept separate from each other in different rooms of the house. But then, on May 23, 2004, Castro brought them all together just so they could watch a show. It was America's Most Wanted and featured both Amanda and Gina's missing persons cases. This was especially painful because the families of both girls were interviewed. Gina said that after this, she couldn't stand him, but had to act as though she was friends with Castro in order to survive. Following Michelle's abduction, there was very little, if any, TV or news coverage about the case. Castro used this lack of effort to find her to torture Michelle, telling her it was because no one was looking for her. This was made all the worse when Amanda Berry's mother appeared on the news frequently begging for her daughter to be returned. Castro would twist this to make Michelle feel even more alone in comparison. Michelle said, "It would hurt because I knew my family didn't care." Castro even said to her, "Ain't you glad I took you?" After bringing the women together to watch TV, they started to talk to each other. They spoke to each other whenever they had the chance because Castro actually forbade them from speaking among themselves. He put gates up to keep them apart, but they could still speak. And when he closed the doors to stop them, they communicated through pictures and notes carefully slid under doors. Whenever Castro left them in the house alone, which was very infrequently, the women would sometimes pretend like everything was okay, dancing and singing together, or watching The Vampire Diaries on TV, attempting to feign any kind of normalcy. On occasion, Castro would allow the women to go outside of the home, but only to the yard or the garage. And whenever they were out of the house, he made them wear disguises, such as a helmet or a wig, like the one shown here. Everything became all the more disturbing when Amanda turned 20. She began to suspect that she was pregnant. For some reason, instead of forcefully terminating her pregnancy as Castro had with Michelle, he allowed her to carry a baby to term. On Christmas Day 2006, Amanda went into labor. Castro had purchased a baby pool for her to give birth in the home and had Michelle help her deliver the baby. While she was in labor, Castro sat in a rocking chair and read a book on babies rather than offering any aid. The birth wasn't easy, not only because she had to give birth without any professional help, but the child wasn't breathing at first. Castro apparently threatened to kill Michelle if she didn't save the baby. Michelle managed to get the child to breathe by blowing air into her mouth. Thanks to her efforts, the baby survived. Amanda named her daughter Jocelyn. The baby became a very welcome distraction and source of joy for the three young women. According to Michelle, Castro began calling Amanda his wife after the child was born and even referred to them all as a family. For the most part, Jocelyn was as hidden from the outside world as the others. But unlike them, Castro would occasionally let her outside in the backyard, to the park, or to Sunday services with him. He even took Jocelyn to visit family, including his mother, Lillian Rodriguez, whom Jocelyn called her grandmother. Rodriguez never revealed where she thought the young girl came from or who she thought her mother was. All the while, Amanda worried Castro might do something to her daughter. The women also watched the breaking news in August 2009 about J.C. Dugard's escape after 18 years of captivity. They were fascinated by the story and followed updates, finding it surreal to see someone escape a situation so similar to their own. Yet, when talking about J.C.'s captor, Philip Garrido, Castro dismissed him as crazy, seemingly willfully ignoring any similarity between himself and Garrido. When one of the women compared their situation to J.C.'s, Castro asked if they were going to write a book about it, revealing his extreme confidence that no one would discover them. Castro occasionally had friends and family over, and on one occasion, the women nearly alerted Castro's daughter, Arlene, that they were there. They were hidden in the basement and almost shouted for help, but feared Castro would kill them if they did. They had another chance to call for help when the house next door was raided by police in 2010, but again were too afraid. On another occasion, Castro hid the women in a van while he had family over, and there were many close calls over the years. During the investigation into Gina's disappearance, police looked into connections with their friends, including Ariel Castro, but became suspicious of her stepfather, Fernando Colon, instead. Colon claimed he had suggested Castro as a suspect, noting his violent tendencies, but the FBI had no record of this tip. Another close call involved Castro's daughter, Angie, who received a disturbing message on her answering machine that seemed to be a pocket dial but included the sound of a young woman screaming. Angie reported it to the police, who traced the call to a different phone. Gina's mother believed there had been a mistake in tracing the call, suspecting it came from Castro. In 2012, Amanda's case seemed to be resolved when Robert Wilford, convicted of murder in 2007, falsely confessed to killing Amanda Berry. Wilford, who passed a lie detector test, claimed he could lead the police to her remains. The search led to an area close to where Amanda was trapped, but no remains were found. Castro's brother Pedro was seen on camera dismissing the search as a waste of money. Everything changed on May 6, 2013, when Jocelyn, who had more freedom, went downstairs and then ran back up to tell Amanda, "I don't find Daddy. Daddy's nowhere around." For the first time, Amanda's bedroom door was left unlocked. Although Amanda wasn't sure if it was another of Castro's tests, she saw it as their chance. She made her way downstairs and found Castro was indeed not around. The front door had an alarm, but the storm door was padlocked. Amanda pulled it open just enough to stick an arm through and started screaming for help. Gina, fearing Castro had caught Amanda, told Michelle to stay with her upstairs instead of going to help. Aurora Marty, a 75-year-old neighbor, heard Amanda's screams and, despite her arthritis, struggled to help open the door. Charles Ramsey, who had just come from McDonald's, saw Amanda's arm and helped pull the door open. Amanda, with her 6-year-old daughter in her arms, ran to a neighbor's house to call 911. Terrified Castro would return, she made the call at 5:52 p.m. When police arrived at 5:54 p.m., they were flagged by Amanda and quickly realized it was not a prank. They forced their way through the door, checked the basement, and found it empty. As an officer climbed the stairs and shouted, "Cleveland Police," Michelle opened the door to see the police. Overjoyed, she ran into their arms, shouting, "You saved me, you saved me," and told them never to let her go. Gina DeJesus also emerged from another bedroom. For the first time since their abduction, the 3 women were outside. Police broadcast the description of Castro's vehicle, and he was arrested at a McDonald's parking lot at 6:16 p.m. with one of his male relatives in the car. Castro's brothers, Pedro and O'Neill, were also arrested but later released as investigators found no involvement from them. The shocking rescue made worldwide news. Instead of celebrating her release after 11 years, Michelle was rushed to the hospital where she was found to have a bacterial infection and only days to live. She eventually recovered, but was left with lifelong physical damage, including an inability to have children and permanent eyesight issues from spending so much time in the dark. Michelle also suffered from facial bone damage from repeated beatings, including one instance where Castro broke her jaw with a barbell. None of this compares to the mental effects of Castro's torture. During those long years of captivity, Michelle occasionally contemplated taking her own life, but her will remained strong when she thought about her son. Once the women were rescued, Castro's house was boarded up. After their discovery, people started coming forward with stories about the house on Seymour Avenue. Elsie Centron, who lived 3 houses away from Castro, claimed that several years earlier, her daughter had spotted a naked woman crawling in Castro's backyard. She reported it to the police, but they didn't take it seriously. Similarly, another neighbor, Israel Lugo, claimed he heard pounding on the doors coming from inside Castro's house and called the police in 2011. When the police arrived, Lugo alleged that they knocked on the door, and when no one answered, they left. The police admitted they had been to the Castro house twice in the last 15 years. but maintained those visits had nothing to do with the women's disappearances. In contrast, after his arrest, other neighbors came forward to say that Castro always appeared happy and respectful. Disturbingly, the kids and parents in the area trusted him, and he was known to take children on rides on his motorcycle. What may be most horrifying is that Castro was almost stopped on multiple occasions. Before he had the chance to hold 3 women captive for a decade, he had a long history of abuse and several run-ins with the police, including an incident involving Ernesto Santiago, the owner of a neighboring house. In 1994, Santiago came to check on his property and noticed a chain-link fence was missing. He asked Castro about it, and according to the police report, Castro became upset, picked up a shovel, and attempted to hit Santiago with it. In 2004, while working as a bus driver, Castro was charged with child endangerment and abduction. He allegedly left a 13-year-old boy on the bus unsupervised, drove to Wendy's, and told the child to lie down while he went inside. He denied ever saying that, claiming, "I just totally forgot he was there. I didn't check the bus." Castro was suspended for 60 days, but the charges were unsubstantiated due to insufficient evidence. He was eventually fired in 2012 for leaving the bus unattended in a fire lane for hours. Additionally, there is a long trail of police reports recording Castro's physical assaults against his common-law wife, Figueroa, dating back to 1989. After an incident, she called the police to report Castro but didn't press charges due to his threats against her and their children. Another report details an incident where Castro slapped Figueroa and injured her shoulder and arm. After a horrific assault where Castro reportedly stomped on her head with his boots in front of their children, Figueroa's son ran away, giving her a chance to lock Castro out. Castro was caught trying to flee, and Figueroa suffered a broken nose, broken ribs, 2 dislocated shoulders, and a lost tooth. Despite her injuries and threats against her, Figueroa never testified, and Castro was never indicted due to insufficient evidence. Victims of domestic violence often become uncooperative after filing charges due to fear, battered women syndrome, or disbelief that the violence will happen again. While it's more difficult to convict without the victim's testimony, it's still possible. It was only after Amanda's daring escape that Castro was brought to justice. During his trial, Castro claimed to have an addiction to adult content, saying, "I'm not a monster, I'm sick." He also contradicted evidence found in his home, such as chains and ropes used to restrain the women, and claimed that any intercourse with them was consensual. Castro admitted to terminating Michelle's pregnancies, but claimed it was always a mutual decision. Castro's narcissistic traits were evident throughout his trial. He exhibited a grandiose sense of self-importance, required excessive admiration, and showed a lack of empathy. He even blamed the FBI for not catching him sooner, saying, "If they would have questioned me, it's possible that it would have ended right there. I feel that the FBI let those girls down." On August 1, 2013, Castro was sentenced to life in prison after pleading guilty to 937 counts of kidnapping and assault, with his sentence extended to include an additional 1,000 years. He complained frequently about prison food and alleged negligence by prison guards. Less than 2 months into his sentence, on September 3, 2013, Castro was found dead in his cell after taking his own life by hanging. His death was initially thought to be autoerotic asphyxiation, but it was later determined that his pants had slipped down due to weight loss. Castro left behind a note citing scripture and mentioning his family, alongside other doodles. While his death denied the women the satisfaction of seeing him punished for his crimes, their nightmare was officially over. All 3 women were eager to begin their lives after captivity, but reintroduction into society was challenging. They suffered from complex post-traumatic stress disorder and faced difficulties moving on from their trauma. Michelle, who was held by Castro the longest, spoke publicly about her experience, expressing her strength and the importance of forgiveness in the healing process. She changed her name to Lily Rose Lee, published 2 books about her life during and after captivity, and married on the anniversary of her escape. Amanda raised her daughter Jocelyn in a safe environment, while Gina learned to drive, returned to school, and co-authored a book with Amanda called Hope. Although Amanda and Gina remain friends, they are no longer in contact with Michelle, as their relationship fractured over time. Despite this, all three women now work to help survivors, highlight missing persons cases, and support the families of the missing. Michelle founded Lily's Ray of Hope. Amanda hosts a news segment on Cleveland's missing persons, and Gina became an ambassador for the Northeast Ohio Amber Alert and founded the Cleveland Family Center for Missing Children and Adults. Their courage and perseverance remain a testament to their incredible ability to survive.